Salve omnes, and welcome back. In this video, we're going to be going through Caesar Book 5, chapters 40 and 41, following the AP Latin syllabus. Before we get started, as ever, a quick review of our color coding. Words in red are indicating subjects, anything in green indicates a verb, and anything showing up in blue, not here unfortunately, indicates a direct object of some kind. Likewise, when we see text that has been highlighted in boldface, that is the main clause of the sentence, and anything not in bold is somehow subordinate to it. So with that out of the way, let's dive right in. Here we are in chapter 40, and the Eburones, led by Ambiorix, having joined up with the Aduatuci, the Nervii, and a bunch of other smaller client tribes and allies, have attacked Cicero. Word of Sabinus's death has not yet reached Cicero, and so this is a bit of a surprise for the Romans. And so here we are in chapter 40, and we see how, after successfully fighting off the initial attack, Cicero and the Romans respond. Straight away, mittuntur. We remember that when verbs start sentences in Latin, that is typically to highlight the action. Having just fought off the initial surprise attack by the Gauls, immediately things are being sent. What is being sent? Well, we can see it right here, literae, but as we read from left to right, it makes perfect sense. Sent to Caesar straight away by Cicero, letters. All right, letters are sent. Then we get these ablative absolutes along with a little C clause in here with, right, first ablative absolute, magnis praemiis, with great rewards having been offered. The idea here is to the messengers, if per tu licent, if they should make it through. Just a fun little fact here, this per tu licent being a pluperfect subjunctive would indicate that this conditional is contrary to fact. So the implication here is something like, if they were to get through, but they didn't. Then we see another ablative absolute. This one has causal force, okay, because all of the roads were besieged. Those who were sent, a participle being used substantively, those who were sent were captured. All right, they were intercepted. Okay, continuing on then, since messages haven't been getting through, but they're still trying, noctu, during the night. Ex materia quam munitionis causa comporta verent. Now we've seen this phrase recently, back in chapter 39. A number of soldiers who had been sent out for the purpose of gathering munitions, and also wood, were captured. The idea, though, here, this comes back because from the material which they had gathered, they being the Romans, for the purpose of munitions, for the sake of armaments and fortifications, etc., etc., etc. Towers, okay, around 120 were constructed incredibile celeritate, with unbelievable speed. Okay, this is an ablative of manner, by the way, and fun fact, the ablative of manner frequently shows up with cum, except when it is being modified by an adjective. So here we are, incredibile celeritate, it is an ablative of manner just without the cum, with unbelievable speed. All right, then continuing on. Quae de esse operi videbantur perficiuntur. So this whole phrase right here, this entire relative clause, is being used as the subject of perficiuntur. All right, things were constructed or built or prepared, right? Something like that. It's facio, right? Things were built, things were made. What things were made? All right, the things which seemed to be lacking for the work. This is a dative with de esse. De sum wants a dative as its object. All right, the things which seem to be missing for what they needed to do. So in other words, they have all this materia, right? And so they use it, primarily to construct these towers, which will be used for defense. But then whatever else whatever else they seem to need is what we would probably say in English, right? Whatever else it seemed like they needed, they constructed. All right, but in Latin we use de esse with the operi. Whatever seemed to be lacking for their task, for their work, was constructed. Okay, moving on. The enemy, however, have not been idle. The very next day, ablative absolute, with much greater forces, right? Multo maioribus copiis, with much greater forces having been gathered. Just a quick note here about multo. Multo is an ablative in being used with maioribus. Maioribus, we see here very plainly, is comparative. This ablative multo is called an ablative of degree of difference. All right, we use these ablatives with comparatives. Typically, you'll either see multo or pauco, something like that. Greater by much or greater by a little, something like that. So not just greater forces, but in English we just say much greater forces, but the Latin here, the force of this ablative would literally be something like greater by a lot, ablative of degree of difference. And then we see what the enemy did. Notice again asyndeton, the lack of connectors here. They attack the camp. They fill in the ditch. All right, remember that Roman camps would be defended not only by a wall, but also by a ditch in front of that wall. The Romans, however, they resist. Okay, technically this verb, of course, is passive, as we can see. So the attack is resisted, as we understand, right? The attack is resisted, eadem ratione, the ablative here, by the same, literally something like in the same manner as, or which it was resisted yesterday. There's a fair bit being sort of gapped here, left out, that we need to understand. So the attack was resisted by us, by our men, by the same approach or in the same way, by means of which the attack had been resisted on the previous day. So in English we would just say something like, the attack was resisted just as they had the day before, right? Something to that effect. By the same manner or approach or so on and so forth with which they had resisted on the day before, because qua is ablative and it takes ratione as its antecedent. And then continuing on, hoc idem, this same thing fit. So the same thing happened, and then we have this this phrase right here, reliquis diebus, and then deinceps, the adverb. On the following days, deinceps, successively. So day after day, in English we would just say something like day after day, the same thing occurred, right? Day after day. The deinceps is necessary because it supplies the idea of in succession or one after the other, deinceps. All right, so the enemy keep attacking day after day. Our men, however, keep fighting back. And here we see the extent of their suffering, right? The extent to which they are going to resist the enemy. Nulla pars nocturni temporis. No part of the, literally of the nocturnal time, of the time of night. We would just say no part of the night, but Caesar here is being a little more wordy, right? No part of the time of night. Now, this ad laborem right here, to the work, okay? This ad laborem is read with nulla pars, all right, nocturni temporis. No part of the night which was for work, okay, is interrupted. So this is very much not the way we would say this in English. In English, we would probably say something like, no part of the night was interrupted from the work. But this odd here is expressing sort of a purposey type thing. No part of the night which was set aside to work. No part of the night which was assigned to the work was interrupted. Not a single part of the night which was set aside to the job at hand was interrupted. Similarly, for the sick and for the wounded, these are both datives, okay, because we see dator down there, right? For the sick and for the wounded, no opportunity for quiet was given. This quietus is also dative, and with vulneratis and aegris, it creates the double dative, one of the greatest uses of the dative in Latin. All right, so no opportunity for rest was given, not even to the sick, not to the wounded. All right, so the Romans are suffering greatly as they resist the Gauls. And here we get a sense of what they spent their time doing, right? As we can see here just in a list, one thing after the other. We start off with this expression, whatsoever, quaecumque, because we know that cumque is this indefinite suffix, right? Whatsoever, and then opus sunt. We've seen opus esse before. It means there is a need for, right, something. Typically, opus esse appears with an ablative and a dative, but that is not what we are seeing here. We're actually seeing it, this can happen, with a subject. We're actually seeing it with quaecumque. This is the subject of opus sunt, whatever is necessary. All right, don't worry about the fact that in English we're saying is. If you want to make it plural, you can say whatever things, right, because quae, neuter plural. Whatever things are required, that's perfectly fine. Opus is standing, therefore, as the predicate in this particular phrase, right? Whatsoever is needed for the fight on the next day. This proximi die is genitive, for the next day's fight, right? For the fight of the following day. At night was prepared. This whole phrase right here is the subject of comparantur. And then we get a list of what these things might be. Sudes are spikes or stakes, many of them that have been burned at the tip, priustai, okay, burned at the tip. You also have a great number of literally something like wall poles, okay, or spears, excuse me, I said pole. Wall spears, okay, are set or established or laid out or prepared. Turres, okay, towers are, literally this means something like equipped with platforms. You can see tabula in there, right? So we see tabula, tables, right? Tablets, something like that. So the towers are being boarded, okay, and set with platforms, okay? So presumably the men can climb up it and have a platform from which to fight. And then we have pinae and loricai. We have battlements, these go on the walls, and then we have loricai. These are breastworks or parapets. So, you know, these are the sorts of defensive fortifications that you would put along the top of a wall so that your men can duck behind them to protect themselves when they're not actively throwing spears or arrows or rocks or whatsoever at the enemy. And we see here that little sense of what the Romans used to build these things. They were literally woven. That's what atexo means, to weave. They were literally woven from wicker, right? Cratibus is wicker, basically. Okay, going right along then. So Cicero, ipse Cicero. So Cicero himself, right? The commander, the legate of the legion. Then we go in with cum. This cum is concessive, and even though there's nothing that necessarily indicates we want a concessive clause, it makes sense when you read it. Although he was, all right, and then we see this this ablative here, all right, tenuissime valitudine. This is called an ablative of quality. This is how he was. We would say in. He was in very weak health. Literally, tenuissima means thin, but we're talking about health. So he was in very poor or very weak health. Ne quidem. This is not the negative ne. This phrase, ne quidem, means not even, and it emphasizes the word that occurs in the middle of it. So in this case, we're emphasizing nocturnum. Cicero did not, he left not even nighttime. He did not even leave himself the night. Here's the sibi, right, himself, right, the dative. He did not even leave himself the time of night for rest. This is basically kind of a purposey expression, expressing purpose for rest or quiet or reprieve. With the result that, this is a result clause. Again, there isn't anything that necessarily indicates we want a result clause, but it makes the most sense in the context. Cicero, although he was in extremely poor health, did not leave himself even a little bit of the time of night to rest. The result was that he was compelled, cogerator, Cicero is the subject, he was compelled to spare himself voluntarily, ultro, right, ultro up here. He was compelled to spare himself. We see that sibi here is dative. That's because the verb parco parcere, wants a dative to finish off its sense. He was compelled to spare himself, to give himself a reprieve, okay, voluntarily, right, ultro, by means of, okay, by means of the concursu and the vocibus militum. Okay, so this is by the gathering and calling of his soldiers. This is kind of a hendiades right here. The idea is that his soldiers gathered and pleaded with him to give himself a break, and so he did. He was forced to give himself a break by the gathering and calling of his men. Okay, continuing on. Then, and this, what follows here is going to seem very, very familiar to us who were reading back when Ambiorix was attacking Sabinus and Cotta. Then, the Duces and Principes of the Nerviorum, okay, so the leaders of the Nervii, who, Duces and Principes is being used as the antecedent here, who had, we'll just go to habebant. Now, two things. Aliquem aditum sermonis. This is kind of an odd expression for us in English because it means something like some sort of approach of speech. So the idea here is like some entry of conversation. The idea here is they had some reason to talk with Cicero. They had some previous dealings with him, and so therefore they were like, they would be able to come forth and say, "Oh, Cicero, we have spoken in the past. I would like to speak with you again." That's the idea of some approach of speech, all right, or of discussion. And people who had a causam amicitiae cum Cicerone, a reason for friendship. So again, this might be people with whom Cicero has just done business in the past, right, a more formal relationship, whereas this would probably indicate Gauls with whom Cicero has formed some kind of a more personal connection because of their dealings and the alliances and the fact that Cicero has been serving here in Gaul now for a while. So what did they do? They said, and again, present tense, but I'm translating it in the perfect, you can do that. They said that they wanted to speak, right? They want to talk with him. Doesn't this seem familiar? And sure enough, Caesar, in case we weren't already clear, Caesar makes it very clear right here, right? So we start off with an ablative absolute, facta potestate. This is literally with the power having been given. This is an expression in Latin, an idiom. It simply means permission was granted. Okay, so they were able to. Having been given the opportunity, we would say in English, right? Latin, of course, does it passively. With the opportunity having been given, they called to mind, or they said, the same things. And then quae right here. This should actually be indicated in blue because it is technically the object of egerat, excuse me, which Ambiorix had done with Titurius. So they're trying the same thing. And sure enough, this should all seem very familiar. All of Gaul is up in arms. Germans have crossed the Rhine. The remaining, or excuse me, the winter camps of Caesar and the rest of the legates are being attacked. But now they have something extra to say, and here it is. This is where, Cicero does not know about this, but he knows now. Indeed, they add, right? They say, they add to what they said before about the death of Sabinus, and they bring forth or present Ambiorix. And we've seen this expression before, causa with a genitive, in this case using a gerundive, modifying fidei, for the sake of literally making their faith, so for the sake of proving what they said was true, right, for the sake of demonstrating good faith. Then the Gauls say that the Romans are wrong, right, the Romans are making a mistake if, okay, why are the Romans making a mistake? If they are hoping for anything, and technically, right, let's go a little deeper here, quidquam goes with praesidi. If they are hoping for anything of help, anything of support, anything of protection from his, from those who, qui takes his as its antecedent, from those who are despairing in their own affairs. So the idea is, right, that the Cicero and his men should not expect help from their fellow legions because they are dealing with their own business and they are, losing hope. However, all is not lost, right? Tamen, they say. However, they, and then here we have this interesting expression, right? We have to take hoc, all goes with animo, and then we have in Ciceronem populum quae Romanum. So Caesar has created this kind of chiastic arrangement, a little bit of chiasmus here, okay? The hoc esse animo is one phrase. They are in this mind. Okay, so this is the way of saying they have this opinion. They are in this mind towards Cicero and the people of Rome. Okay, so this is their attitude, the Gauls' attitude, they say, towards the people of Rome. that, okay, and then this is what they're going to say, that they want, now there's a little weirdness here, they want nothing. Notice how I made nolent positive as if it were wellent instead of nolent. They literally, they do not want nothing. That's not exactly what this means. Okay, even though we're using two negatives in Latin and in Greek and in other languages, when you use two negatives like this, that's not a double negative. The nihil is actually there because nolent. They do not want anything is how we understand this, even though literally it looks like they're saying they do not want nothing. That's not how it works. So the Gauls are saying that they do not want anything except, and then we have these two phrases in the middle here, except that they, this is the Romans here, recusens, that they leave the winter camps. Okay, and yes, Hiberna should be indicated as blue. It is in fact the object. They leave the winter camps. And that, right, they not, that this consuetudinem not invetescere, not grow old. Okay, so they don't want this habit or this custom. What custom? The custom of wintering in their territory, the custom of staying there. All right, they do not want a military camp set up every year in their territory. That's the custom they're talking about. They don't want it to inveterascere. You can see in the middle here, wet is from vetus, which is the adjective in Latin that means old. They do not want it to grow old. So they don't want this to become a regular thing. They don't want this to become a habit. That's all they want, they say. And so since that's all they want, licere, it is completely permitted. It's fine for them. This would be the dative that licet always wants. It's fine for the Romans, unharmed. Per se, this is the Romans, on their own, by themselves. Okay, even though it's reflexive and it should refer to the Gauls, it doesn't, because we're so deep in the various subordinate discourse here that we've basically circled back around. This is the Romans. The Romans are permitted, it is permitted for them, unharmed, by themselves, to depart from the winter camps and into whatsoever parts they desire, to set out without fear. Doesn't this sound familiar? But here we see that Cicero is not Sabinus and Cotta. Cicero, to these things, one thing only, modo, adverb only, he responds. This is what he says. It is not the custom of the people of Rome to accept from an armed enemy conditions or terms. If they, the Gauls, they, Wellant, if they desire to depart from weapons, so in English we would say if they desire to put down their weapons, if they desire to leave behind their weapons, but Latin uses ab armis discedere, they, the Gauls, may use se, this se is Cicero, they may use him as an advocate. This is adjutore, this is in apposition to se. Notice that se and adjutore are rendered in the ablative case. That is because utor wants ablatives as its direct object. And what else will they be permitted to do? They can send a delegation or ambassadors, right? This is context here. This is not legatos, the commanders of the legion. This is legatos, ambassadors or messengers or a delegation to Caesar. And now there's a little shift here. We're not doing the subjunctives anymore. Now we're back into indirect speech. Cicero said that. So the he of Cicero is understood. All right. Cicero hoped that, and then this imperaturos, there's an essay missing, obviously, because this participle, future participle, is indicated as the verb. Cicero said that he hoped that they would get, and then this is the object of impetraturos esse. There's an ea missing as the implied antecedent of quae, that they would get what they were desiring or seeking. They would get what they wanted, we would say in English, but literally what they were seeking. They would get what they were seeking on account of, right, on account of Caesar's justitia, on account of his justice or fairness. So we see right there that Cicero's response is very, very different than Sabinus and Cotta's response. And that brings us to the end of chapter 41. So things are about to get very interesting, given that the gambit that worked on Sabinus and Cotta did not work on Cicero. So we will see in the coming chapters how things play out for the Romans. It is going to be a long and hard slog ahead. Maximus gratias for making it this far, and we will see you in the next one. Valete!